The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Well, as the world watches as the Israel-Iran conflict is escalating, one question that I have is, what could this mean for global fertilizer traffic and much more? Here to talk to us about that and take a look at the fertilizer markets in general, Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer for StoneX. And Josh, first off, it's good to talk to you again, buddy. How are you?
Not too bad. I feel like I'm only on here when there's some crazy world event that goes on that could affect the fertilizer market fundamentally. I don't know what's going on.
Well, you know, you're good at bringing us the updates on that, Josh. That's why I bring you on when we have these crazy world events that happen, buddy. It's one of those things where, you know, it's something that, hey, when something happens, I am picking up the phone and I'm calling Josh and I'm going, is this a big deal? And that's where I want to start. Israel, Iran. Now, obviously, this is a big deal. But when it comes to fertilizer and some of those global flows, do we need to be extremely concerned or do we need to watch the situation right now?
I'm going to put this in the watchful. And you notice my eyes are over here on the left-hand side right now because I'm pulling up a couple graphs that I want to talk about. Obviously, Iran is a major manufacturer of nitrogen fertilizer. They have for a number of years. And so when I look at our updated 2024 trade values, Iran sits in the number 3 spot. They exported about 4.5 million tons of urea over the course of the calendar year 2024. Russia was number 1 at 8.8. Qatar was number 2 at 5.2. Iran number 3 at 4.5. We go to the next one. We've got to go further down the list on this one. You got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got to go to number 7, Iran, exporting about 800,000 tons of anhydrous. So, major deal, right? That's a major manufacturer. It's a major supplier of nitrogen fertilizer to the world. They are akin to another China. And you know how much I talk about China as far as them pushing or pulling price ideas. So, major deal there. One thing folks don't know, Israel's the 4th largest potash exporter in the world. So we're watching the potash very, very closely as well. So yeah, we've got 2 of the 3 major fertilizer things that we're watching, but it's important to note we're watching. I don't think this is, now we have seen prices rebound this morning, but I have not seen anything that tells me fertilizer supplies have been impacted so far.
I think about this. If this does continue to escalate into a broader regional conflict, then I think that could add even more concern to the fertilizer markets. But also, I mean, Josh, outside of summer fill right now for U.S. producers, I can't think that this is going to be a major pain point, at least in the short term. Would it, Josh?
Now, and it's a thing. We're moving into that really slow summer period for the world. Demand starts to fall off, and this is why we typically start to see our seasonal lows. People stop buying after the spring seasons get wrapped up. Manufacturers are going to continue to produce, and those unsold inventories continue to build. That puts pressure. That makes them uncomfortable, and so they start to drop the price to basically be like, please find a price that makes sense to take this stuff off of my hands. So if this was going to happen, this is a solid time for this to happen. It's at the very early onset of it. We've got plenty of time for this thing to hopefully correct back lower.
Let's talk about just some of the values in general here, as we've been watching prices, of course, have been on the high side in many different categories under the fertilizer sector. What are some of the key things you're tracking here as we round out the week, Josh?
Yeah, obviously the nitrogen thing is going to be all wrapped up around this whole Iranian-Israel conflict. And the thing I do want to point out with that is let's look at how the 2 parties do operate. And this is why I'm not nearly as concerned about supply as other people might be. Israel, they are surgical in their strikes. I mean, they sit there and they say, this is the 3 square inch area we want this missile to hit. And they hit it every single time. They are very good at war. And they're not going to have a lot of casualties outside of what they're trying to do. So what that tells me is this isn't a World War II carpet bombing type situation. They're going after their intended target. They're going to hit their intended target. They're not targeting nitrogen production. That's not what their goal is. They're trying to take out a specific thing. Now, on the flip side, Iran does go with more of the carpet bombing. You know, I saw last time they sent all the rockets over in this spray and pray type situation. Well, that can sit there and it can impact some of it, but you don't have a lot of population around things like their potash mines or operations. And Iran is going for the newsworthy. They're trying to get their people excited. They're trying to strike people, but people aren't around the manufacturers. So we don't, again, that's what I'm watching just in case it does get a little bit more broad, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Phosphate market, we're watching China and India around the world. Not to mention our own U.S. Countervailing duties and tariffs shutting out 4 of the biggest exporters in the world. And again, potash, a little bit of Israel, but more just seeing the fact that world prices are staying elevated with India and China locking up big contracts.
And, India, I'm glad you brought them up. I mean, they were in the news in your update to folks this week a couple of times with their tender. And then you look at on that phosphate side, they just continue to support some of these price levels, don't they, Josh?
Yeah, they have been behind on their phosphate stockpiles since basically the same time last year. The government tried to get ahead of the marketplace, tried to push prices a little bit further down to save themselves some money. I don't blame them for this move, but unfortunately, the market turned against them, and it's continued to move against them this entire time. They are playing catch up. The world's biggest buyer of phosphate, who is government funded, is playing catch up. And at the same point, China, who's your typical largest exporter of phosphate at 9-10 million tons a year, we're going to be fortunate if we hit 4 million ton this year. So that's a nasty S&D situation globally. And it just, every time India steps in to buy, the price moves up. If you go back to, I think it was March, they were buying product vessels in the 640s CFR. This tender they just got offers in 780.
It's a lot of interesting things to watch around the world. One thing here at home, I do want to ask you about. This was something that stood out to me in your latest media update, and I'm going to pull up the chart you sent out with it as well. Talk to me about NOLA and DAP. What is going on here, Josh?
Yes. So what this graph is looking at, just to give the audience a little bit of an idea on this, I like to look at farming marketing as a input and output. It takes the emotion away, because when we see a grain price, it's never high enough. We see a fertilizer, it's never low enough. There's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature. But it can bring in that human nature, that emotional aspect of it. So I like to sit there and say, we all want to keep more bushels at home. So ultimately, the best value is spending less bushels on the number of on whatever the fertilizer is. So this one's looking at the weekly price of how many bushels it takes to pay for a 1 ton of DAP. Now, this is going to a wide audience. I never know specifically who's it going to. So I'm using New Orleans DAP barge values, and I'm using Chicago corn. Right now, we're using December 26. But that line that is just below, that's 2008. That was that first super cycle we saw. That was the highest we had ever seen. Unfortunately, Jesse, I updated this overnight. That ratio is 153, 154. So for this time of year, we have never spent more bushels of our corn to pay for that phosphate input. It's never been worse than what it is today.
And just thinking about this and that cost price squeeze that we're seeing on the farm continuing, I know it's going to be a big concern here as we move forward. But for all the negative that we're talking about, are there positive nuggets that we could take away from what we're seeing in the fertilizer markets this week, Josh?
It's been hard. I've been able to sit there and say, at least nitrogen had been falling. We had been seeing quite a bit of weakness. Urea prices, for example, in the Gulf of Mexico during the lead up to spring, we saw those things rally significantly, going from the mid 350s up to the mid 500s. And they had fallen back to the mid 350s, and it looked like it was continued to go down. Unfortunately, this Iran-Israel conflict has kind of messed that up. Phosphate, I don't have good news for you, man. It's unfortunate, but this is a global event that our U.S. policies are actually making worse for our farmers. And then potash, I had been holding out hope. I thought that was going to be down, $25-$50 a ton from where the ending spring values were. But with India and China locking up their contracts, I'm just struggling to see that happen now. So it's sunny out some days. That's positive news.
Well, how about I spin it to you this way then? What do producers need to keep watching right now when it comes to fertilizer markets?
I would say right now, the biggest piece of advice I can have, do not stick your head in the sand. I think we actually probably talked about this last time. It is so easy. Times get hard. Times get tough like what they are today. And what we want to do is we just want to walk away. We don't want to hear it. We want to stick our heads in the sand and say, it'll be better when I pull my head out. We cannot do that. There are going to be opportunities out there. Now, they may not be as glowing and great as what we want them to be, They may not be there nearly as long as we think they should be, but there will be opportunities in the marketplace. But if we're not watching, if we're not paying attention, if we're not talking to our supplier, we're going to miss them. So that's the biggest thing I can tell you is there will be opportunities for the farmer to lock in decent values out there. It's just, it may be far and few between. We got to jump into there. We got to be talking to our suppliers.
A lot of things to keep an eye on. We'll definitely track it with you. I know folks can go to stonex.com for more as well. Josh Linville, VP of Fertilizer at StoneX. Good to talk with you again, my friend, and we will catch up with you again real soon. Appreciate it.
See you, buddy.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.